like going back to the 1930s with the Frankfurt School real quick, what Marxists realized in the early 1900s was that it wasn't these revolutions, these Marxist revolutions weren't taking hold in the Western world like they were in North Korea. Well, that was a little early for Korea, but even with Russia, China, obviously the Chinese Communist Party. And so they were looking and wondering, like, why isn't Marxism taking a hold in the West? And what they realized was because the Industrial Revolution, which a lot of these other countries hadn't had at this point, was benefiting the worker. Like generationally, every family was doing better than the last on average. One factory job could support a family type of thing. So it was hard to really turn those people into radicals and for them to want to overthrow the capitalist system when they sat there and went, life isn't that bad for me, right? And so what they started to do was, this is where the concept of cultural Marxism started taking hold. And they said, okay, the workers aren't going to be the vessel for our communist revolution. We're going to have to start going after what can be perceived as marginalized groups. And so that's where you see even like the original civil rights movements in America were very infiltrated by Marxists. The feminists movements after a certain point did. And so that's very much where I see them coming in. And yeah, you can definitely, on your point, as somebody that, has championed feminism, there's definitely a lot of aspects, especially in the early days, that even I can get behind. But then it's once these movements started to become co-opted for these socialist and Marxist ideals. But then what ended up happening as well, to your point about the femininity in the sneaky fucker strategy. So yeah, how that works is, and even Orwell noted this in 1984, right? He said, women are the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallower of slogans, because socially, women are essentially the moral enforcers. And what's really interesting is there's actually a book too called Chimpanzee Politics by Franz de Waal, who is one of the leading primatologists in the world. And he shows how even like female apes, as soon as a man wants to, a male chimp wants to start making a run for alpha male status, he immediately starts to go and try to ally himself with all the women in the troop, because they'll essentially, quote unquote, gossip their way into propelling them up the social hierarchy. And so what I think ends up happening here is these regimes, certain regimes, especially Marxist ones, are appealing to that compassionate nature of females and telling them, that we're going to remake a world with compassion as the central virtue, which understandably women would want to get on board with. But then what ends up happening as well with this sneaky fucker strategy is that the more, and I don't even like this term, but it's one that a lot of people recognize, where it's like the beta males, what they try to do in order to, if they can't compete with other alpha males, and this is true in chimps, right? Like even that sneaky fucker strategy, it's across the animal kingdom. Like evolutionary biologists came up with that term. It wasn't even necessarily about humans. And what they'll do is, because alpha chimps get to decide who mates with who, and they obviously usually end up mating with all the females, and they tell the beta chimps to screw off. But those beta chimps will then go wait in places that they know the alpha chimp won't be, where female chimps will go, and then while they're vulnerable, try to get what they want there. And so that's what I see largely happening in this as well when it comes to the political arena, is you see it with these, men that, okay, let's say they're at a typical high school party, they wouldn't be getting the female attention because they've got to compete with the quote unquote jocks, right? But if they go to a feminist rally where none of those jocks are, then they don't have to compete for the attention of the females. And so they have a higher aspect. And so that's that whole sneaky fucker strategy is they essentially act more feminine in order to get into areas that the typical males aren't. And so I definitely see that happening.